Hey, what is going on, guys? My name is Blazekiller, and today we are back with another video. In today's video, I'm going to be giving y'all a complete guide to logic in Lumber Tycoon 2. I've done some guides and some complete guides in my time here, but I haven't done one with logic because logic is pretty complicated. It can be pretty scary at first, but it's really not too complex. Now, some of the basic logical components can be found in the Woods of Rust, from the button to the lever to the pressure plate, to the wires themselves. And of course, there are other logical components here, like the conveyors and like a lot of other things that can be activated using logic. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to be making our way over the ferry to Link's logic, where all of the logical components are contained, including all of them that are already here in the Woods of Rust. So let's head over there and we will continue our tutorial there. All right, now that we are here at the Tropics biome, we see our store here, Link's Logic. This is the home of all of your logic needs. It's going to have all of the basic and more intermediate and complex items here that are for sale. So let's go through each and every one of them. I'm going to buy them, I'm going to bring it back to my base, and then show you all how to use each and every one of them. But first, let's review them one by one. So we have wires. These are just colored wires. Fun fact, there's actually a pink wire in the files that you can obtain through exploitation, but I wouldn't recommend that, obviously. But it's going through circulation, through trading and whatnot. So same thing as normal wires, they're just colored, right? They light up. I'll show you guys those later. Now, signal inverter, it does exactly what you think it does. It inverts the signal once it is powered. I'll show you guys examples of all of these things once I bring them back to my base. The AND gate, it requires both input signals to generate and out, both signals to be on for an output to be generated. Now, the OR is either or both to be on to generate a signal. The XOR is kind of a combination of these two, where either one of them can be on, but not both and not neither. This is pretty much, it's like a daylight sensor in a sense, where if you set it to specific parameters in the day and it outputs a signal given what time of day it is. The wood detector, kind of self-explanatory. If it senses a piece of wood that is the same wood that's inside of this little hole, it'll give off a signal. And the laser and the laser detector work in tandem, where if they're facing one another and the laser is tripped, it activates a signal, I believe, or it does the opposite, which you can kind of combine with the signal inverter if you want to activate an actual signal. And then these things are self-explanatory, more or less. Pressure plate, it activates a signal when you stand on it or when something else is on it. The lever, you flick the lever, it activates a signal. The button, you press it, it activates a signal. This is really what we're going to be using to connect everything together, connect all these logical components, and this is really what the signals are going to be traveling through. This is, in a sense, the means by which the electricity can travel, using kind of a real-world example there. And then the hatch is similar to a door, except it has one point of activation instead of two. When you open a door, a point of activation, that being the doorknob, changes location, whereas this stays in one place, which can be pretty useful for some things. And then finally, we have the signal delay and then signal sustain. Essentially, you're gonna kind of set it to your own parameters, to your own guidelines here, however long you want it to delay the signal. In other words, it activates, and then after a certain amount of time, it activates the signal. And this one kind of does the opposite in a sense, where it's going to hold the signal for a longer period of time rather than it just going on and off. So just to give a quick example, if I pressed a button once, the button's going to go on and off really quickly. But if I hooked up a button to this, then it would sustain that signal for longer than a quick second, maybe 5 seconds. And then you can adjust it however long. So let me go purchase these. Let me bring them back to my base, set them up, and give you guys some more concrete examples of how these work. All right, we have set up ourselves a little demonstration here of the most basic components of logic in Lumber Tycoon 2. So starting with the most basic, we know how this, or at least most of us do, know how this works. A lever, when you activate the lever and you toggle it by flicking the switch, it provides a signal, a current, with this wire. Now the wires are simply just wires. They function by going on and off. They're on when they're blue and they're off when they are black. And each of these components of a wire, there's an input and an output, as you can see here. This is the input because it is connected right to the source, and then the output is wherever you would like it to go out to. Now there's a lot of different things that can be activated using wires in this game. You can activate vehicle spawners. You can activate different paintings if you want. Like if I were to open this and if I were to connect a wire to it, I'm not going to do that right now, but let's do it right now. If I were to connect a wire to this. It also works with the bold and brash painting, which makes a noise when you activate it. It makes the bold and brash sound. This is likewise just going to do something similar by expressing the painting itself. Let me see if I can do this really quickly. Right, so something like that. It can also activate a vehicle spawner. It can change the values here on the sawmill. It can change the direction of different conveyors. And we have here the button. Works similarly, but it obviously is a shorter current here. We have the pressure plate. If you stand on it or you put something else on it, then it's going to activate. This brings to mind the colored wires here. I have a lot of them on the side of my base. Let me just go to demonstrate those really quickly. Interestingly, there's also a pink wire, as I mentioned earlier, that's been taken out of the game. But we have these variants here. We also have different icicle lights. There was also magenta icicle lights in this game, but they were taken out. And then we have the spooky icicle, or spooky Halloween lights, I believe is the name of them. And then we have the candy cane lights as well. So all those are able to be activated using wires. I should say they need to be activated somehow using some sort of logical component for them to light up. Now you can use something to put on a pressure plate to activate it. Interestingly, items used to actually be able to be opened when you activated them using a signal. That's not a thing anymore. But you can also activate items that make sounds, like a rubber duck, like the Scoob, which both makes a sound and does something very unique. You can use this to activate a firework launcher, as well as a whole bunch of other things. Like you can activate this because there's a switch on the side. You can activate this because there's a switch on this side. You can do a whole bunch of things in this game with logical components. You can do something as simple as a garage door opener, say using these pressure plates when you step on them with your vehicle. You can do something like a wood sorter, which you're going to use something like this, a wood detector, to serve as the foundation for that. And you can do something even as complex as making a calculator. People do some crazy things in this game, but this is just a basic guide, so I'm not going to show you guys anything too crazy or any examples really more than that I have done already. So let's get into more of the intermediate things that we purchase here at the Link's Logic. So we have the AND gate, the OR gate, and the XOR gate. So the AND gate requires both of these things to be on for the signal to go on, hence the name AND. This and that need to be on. They have different things on the side by which you can differentiate them, but you can also click on them and just, if you ever get confused of which one's what. Now the OR gate is either one can be on to activate. Obviously, if none of them activate, then it's not going to activate the signal, or they can both be on as well. And then finally, the XOR gate is this, kind of a combination, as I said earlier, of these two, where if either of the two are on, it activates, but if both are off, or both are on, there will be no activation. So only one of them can be on here. All right, now here we have the signal inverter. Now this can be useful when used in tandem with the laser here. But just basically how this works is currently my signal is off, but it's on. So how is it the case? I can move this wire, it's still on. If I activate it though, it's going to do the opposite. So it's just going to invert the signal. It's going to do the opposite of what I tell it to. Now here we have I believe the sustain. Yeah, the sustain and the delay. They have different icons here if you can memorize those. If not, you can always just click on them. The arrow is pointing to where the output's going to be. So you put the input into this other side. And essentially, this is kind of a bad, tool to use it with the lever, but I should have used the button, but it's okay. You can get the same concept. You can click this a number of times to adjust the delay or the duration of the sustain. So let's start with the sustain. Say I click this on and off really quickly. It's going to, sustain it for however long this is. So say I want to increase the sustain. It's going to hold it for however long that bar right there holds. So let me just do it the max so you can kind of get the best example. As soon as that bar goes down, that thing stops sustaining, hence the name sustain. Then the delay, hence the name delay, is going to delay the signal. So I turn it on and off. It's not going to activate until it hits that white bar right there. So these can serve a whole bunch of different uses. And yeah, so let's move on to our next one here. So the laser is used in tandem with the laser detector, as I mentioned earlier, such that when you trip the laser, first you have to activate it. It makes kind of a cool activation noise if you can hear that. And once you trip the wire, in other words, or the laser, in other words, once something goes in front of it, it's going to deactivate it, or something, I believe an object can go in front of it as well. Yeah, so what I mentioned earlier with this being used alongside of the signal inverter is when you trip the laser, you're like, okay, well, the signal goes off. Shouldn't it, what if I want it to go on? Well, you can do that. Say I want to connect that to an inverter. You can see how very quickly this can get kind of complex, but also pretty unique and pretty fun to work with because multiple different things can be used alongside one another. So now I trip the laser, it's going to activate that signal. Say you create a laser in front of your base, and then once you activate the signal, it goes to a chop saw, which ends up killing the person entering your base. So you don't want them to enter your base in the first place. That's just an idea. Now, wood detector, very simple concept. You place whatever wood you want this to detect. Inside of here has to be a small piece of wood, so adjust your sawmill accordingly. Now, once that same piece of wood comes into contact with this, it's going to activate a signal. Now, this is most commonly used for wood sorters, alongside of the conveyors. You have your wood going along the conveyor, and then you can have automatic wood sorters, which there are tons of tutorials on YouTube if you're curious about that, where the wood is going along your conveyor, but as soon as it passes this, it activates the signal, which makes, I think there's also a conveyor that has a little, not really sure what to call it, but something that can push the wood to a certain side. And that can kind of really sort your wood from there, or put it into the sawmill, or whatever you want it to do. Now, this one's also very unique, the clock switch. So it looks kind of complex, but essentially what's happening here is this black line is moving constantly, and that's the time of day. So you can see that it's getting, it's getting kind of to the peak of the day, right? So, right, it's just about noon, it looks like. Now, if I want to switch these red and green lines, I can press these buttons on the sides. Essentially what this does is when this black line is in contact with this white line, a signal is going to be output here. So let me just change this around such that this comes into contact with that, and the signal is going to go. Now say I want to, I guess I can't really go the opposite way, but once this gets to a certain point in the day, then it's going to deactivate. Now this might be useful if you want to have lights at night, for instance. You can set up different lights that are only activated once they are at night, and then you can kind of adjust these things accordingly. So remember, once this black line touches this white line, then a signal is out, and then once it goes out of this range right here of the red and the blue, or red and the green, then that signal is going to stop signaling. So that's just a basic tutorial. There's a lot of different things that wires and that logic wires are used for, wires can activate, and logic is used for. Just to give you a few more examples that I didn't explain here. Wires can activate anything from car doors to paintings, as I mentioned earlier, to dynamite, to cabinets, to ovens, to fridges. They can activate different kinds of lights, from floodlights to the work light. They can activate lamps. And there's just a whole bunch of different things that can be used for logic. Logic at first kind of seems like something that was kind of scary for me, intimidating a bit, and maybe it was for you. But hopefully this video really showed you that it's not too complex at all. There's a ton of complex things that can be done with it. And if you're looking to do some of those things, then there's tutorials for each and every one of those things on YouTube already, chances are. And if there's not, leave them in the comments below, and maybe I'll get to it. But logic is typically not my thing. It's super cool though. I really enjoyed learning more about logic through preparing for this video. Hope you learned something new from this tutorial. Hope logic is less intimidating now. If you're looking for something more in depth, go watch Apton or Electrotech's videos on logic. Electrotech specifically has a lot of tutorials relating to logical contraptions that you might be interested in. So go check those out. Shout out to them for help with this video. Without further ado, hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell for me so that you'll be notified whenever I do upload a new video. Without further ado, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.